Welcome to the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
All right, welcome to another episode of the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com. Coming to you on a wonderful Tuesday morning in the very actually warm Red River Valley, but that's a discussion for a different day. Our guest today on the pod is somebody new that we haven't chatted with before. He is a sports columnist from the Denver Post newspaper in Colorado. His name is Sean Keeler. And the reason I asked Sean on the podcast today was because he wrote a piece recently that, besides just being fantastic writing, and I told Sean this before I hit record, that I'm jealous of the fact that his lead was just fantastic and drew me in as somebody who is a cynical, sometimes prickly columnist myself. It's going to be of interest for North Dakota State football fans because, as we all know, the Bison are scheduled to play Colorado on August 31st in Boulder. And you might have heard, don't know if you heard this, but you might have heard that the head coach of Colorado is one Deion Sanders, who is taking all of the oxygen, or at least much of the oxygen, in college football for the past couple of years. And what Sean Keeler wrote the other day was sort of a little opposite of what we've been hearing, especially from national media, but maybe even a little bit even from local media in Denver. And with that, we want to welcome into the podcast Sean Keeler of the Denver Post. Hello, Sean. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hello, Mike. Thank you for having me. As a child of the North Central Conference, this is a thrill to me in a way to touch in my roots. You didn't see that coming, did you?
That's I love the twist. But now, as I quickly am processing, I'm thinking Northern Colorado, correct?
You are not correct. Right. You know, because I know you said we could extemporate. I'll give you an extemporate before we jump into this. I, sir, am a native of Sioux City, Iowa.
The Morningside Maroon Chiefs.
Exactly. I grew up 2 blocks from Morningside College. My father was a professor at Morningside College. So the Bison and NDSU have an almost impenetrable tattoo burned into my soul of my youth. And that is the NDSU of the mid to late 80s, when I think Gary Barnett was playing for them, because we just this at one point, although our relationship became fraught on goofy levels, but that's a whole nother podcast. That's a whole nother psychologist study from my Des Moines Register days. But yeah, I grew up going to the NCC games and seeing Morningside generally get its tails kicked. And I specifically, my first impression of NDSU football, I didn't look up the year, but was on a snowy November or early December, probably mid-November day in Sioux City, Iowa, in which it was the first time I'd ever seen live cheerleaders having to do push-ups for points.
Yes.
And I want to say that they beat the pants off. It got to be like 68-3, 64-3, something crazy. And I thought the Huskers had rolled into town at a time when that meant something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
That was the best compliment I could ever give anybody from NDSU. As I said, oh, well, they're the Division II Nebraska. And now you just laugh and feel very sad about that. But at the time, it was this, when you're 12 years old, 11, whatever it is, I kept score. My father helped run. This is such a not interesting story, but my father helped with it was probably student radio or campus radio or what have you as a mass comm professor. And so I'm spotting and keeping score. And when you're doing that in a game that's like whatever, 66-3, 68-3, I just started feeling bad for these undergrads who the football players looked like they were having a great time, and the cheerleaders looked absolutely miserable. And that's never left me. And so my impression of Bison football has been framed in the 40 years, 38 years, whatever, since. I can't do math. I can't do math ever, but certainly not before lunch. And so to reconnect with my roots in a way was a thrill. And so I was so excited to get your invite and a chance to come on here. So as a child of what was the NCC before everybody went big, like North Dakota State did, or went very small in the case of Morningside and largely, I'm not even sure if they even play football. I know they went NAI.
I think they do play football in is it the UMAC or some small Division III?
Briarcliff and Morningside are now, I believe, rivals more or less formally in the same town, but they weren't then. They weren't in the 80s. The poor Maroon Chiefs, not a PC name now, would have to would just got their brains knocked in generally by the teams that then would become FCS or FBS powers. But there was once a time, kids, that was a thing, and I was a child of Morningside. So there you go. It all comes from you.
I did not see that coming, and it was a fantastic twist on the podcast. So thank you for that. So as you were sitting in the press box at the stadium, you must have been formulating all these words in your head about how to describe what you were seeing on the field. And all of that now, 38 years later, 40 years later, has manifested itself into you becoming a columnist at a major United States newspaper. And what you wrote recently, I'm going to read to our listeners. The first couple of paragraphs. Now, this column kind of, as happens when you're a columnist, the column wanders to different areas and everything else. That's the mark of a good mind and a good columnist is sometimes you kind of go here and there a little bit to make your point, and you did. But I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs, and we're going to discuss what you have to say about Primetime, Coach Prime, and what might be coming for North Dakota State or what might be coming for Colorado when the teams meet in Boulder on August 31st. I'm an old radio guy as well, so let me clear my throat.
That would be great.
Deion Sanders is a false prophet, the Bruce Lee of B.S., Harold Hill, and designer shades. He's also in the wrong business. If Coach Prime wanted to run for governor, he'd kill it. Rallies for breakfast, adoring fans for miles, no NCAA, no recruiting rules, no pesky Washington States to hammer you senseless in the cold, no Stanford to hand you a hubris sandwich, no scoreboard staring back with an inconvenient truth you can't bend to fit the company narrative. Wow, you kind of went after the god out there in Colorado. Now, you can give the background on why you went this direction, and sports fans who pay attention probably know why that is. But explain what led you, Sean, to begin your column with those very strong words about Deion Sanders.
I think it was in the case with Deion. It was probably one butt kissing by Skip Bayless too many. Mm-hmm. That sort of, I think he had been on Undisputed, whatever FS1 show they've got it running now, a few days prior to that, and it kept on with the we're going to make the playoffs, we're going to make the playoffs, we're going to make the playoffs. And privately, there's been kind of a joke that that's probably in respect to the Bison, like, you do know they scheduled North Dakota State as the opener, the season traditional Power Five destroyer of worlds coming into that opener right now, as we'll discuss, and we've talked about privately. That's not as simple a presumption as it used to be, probably sadly for your audience, but there is a respect and a fear there. If you're not somebody who's in the top 15 in the FBS traditionally, that you're gonna get trapped, locked in there. So one, that's been a running joke that if there's ever Deion is despite his reputation is prone to trap game moments, and you've got team trap coming in. It's probably not the best time to go pitching that around. One. Two, I came to the realization, and it might have been after you let that bird fly away and it had done its damage, and it has. It has on several fronts. That I don't think my consternation with where CU football is and with Deion Sanders is not so much with Coach Prime as it is with the cult. I think in a way, indirectly, it was me trying to say to the, not even so much to Prime, but to the cult to say, y'all got to ratchet it down just a bit because it's annoying and you're just going to be let down the way that realistically for the last 6 months, with the exception of the recruiting front, you've kind of been let down. And the irony is 2 days after that ran, and I think he almost gave me fodder for that after it appeared on two fronts. And I believe it was last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, of which he had posted something on Instagram. CU social media, Deion's social media is unwatchable and unreadable for this reason, of which they ran a screen cap, and I'm trying to describe this succinctly, which was presumed to be Prime talking to having a text exchange with someone, of which it's going to be great. This has been years in the making. This has been awesome. It's two sides saying that something great is coming. Can't wait for 10 a.m. Maybe it was Wednesday. Can't wait for 10 a.m. Wednesday. So are you a Monty Python fan?
Absolutely, yes.
Of course you are. You're a learned man.
Well, no, but yes, I'm a fan. Go ahead. Sorry.
You're a fan. You don't have to be a learned, but you're learned enough. So you're learned enough to know who Life of Brian, the movie, is making fun of.
Yes.
Not Christ.
No.
It's not the teachings. No. It's not the gospel. It's the followers.
Yes.
There's a lot of that. That's a very quick shorthand that if you've seen Monty Python and the Life of Brian, Deion's followers are not healthy people. Let's just be clear on that. I'll put that on them. There are healthy people, but there are some that are very not. And there's a lot of worshiping sandals is a great way to actually you want to be really obtuse. There's a little bit of that in direct terms as well when we get into shoe culture.
Yes.
Yeah. So this comes out. Oh, something great is coming at 10 a.m. And it becomes this interpretation of the word in a way. And it gets to be, because they haven't had a DC hired then. And they went, it's going to be this. Bill Belichick is coming.
Oh, my God.
Jim Leonard is coming. We're going to revive Woody Hayes from the grave. I don't know. It just begins to be these ridiculous propositions. And because we've had two competing TV studios, I think this happened with the Bison too, but because everyone in the world came to September of last year into Boulder, and you had the Fox show and the ESPN show, and I had The Rock say to me something funny as he passed by me, and we have music, like everything stupid now happens here, like it's Super Bowl all the time, that now we can't presume the stupid won't happen. Like it became a running joke that if they'd been 5-0, Taylor Swift was going to sing the national anthem, and we were just going to go, yeah, sure. Yeah, that'll be what. I mean, Lil Wayne ran out instead of Ralphie to lead the team. We are breaking we're breaking all the rules. Everything's on the table. This got long-winded, but you said we had time. So when Deion on his Insta puts out a staged text he's got, it could mean, and it's cryptic, could mean anything. Again, Life of Brian. We're going to take this out. So at 10 a.m. sharp, Deion Sanders announces on Twitter he has a partnership with a new creatine company.
Okay. Which
kind of goes back to the column, does it not? Like, I almost wondered if he threw that in there for me. Bless him, he didn't. They had that lined up where I just look back as you would, and you just think, I'm not, you know what? I may have been mean, but was I wrong to a point? Yeah. No, I tell you where I was not wrong.
I don't think you were mean, first of all. And people, by the way, if you're listening to this in your car, wherever you're listening to it, I will put the link to Sean's column so you can read it with your own eyes on our forum website inside the story that contains this podcast, so you can check it. I think the Denver Post has. I think you get a free article or two, or you can buy a subscription. By the way, but
You could do if you could do that. You want to make a fat guy's Christmas better? Please do
yes.
that.
And then you could read all of the Bison coverage and CU coverage from the Denver perspective for the next 6 months or whatever it is until the game is played. So why don't we do that?
Be sure, full disclosure, to click on my story before you do.
Yes.
Kids.
I see. Okay, I get it. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps. It helps the author.
It's called a conversion. It's called a conversion in our lingo here, and it also helps me if you click on my articles and buy a subscription after that. But that's a whole different story.
Exactly. Please do like and subscribe. I do think that's where it goes into the politics thing. Prime is Trump. And that's not to make this a political, we won't make this a political discussion. Let's just stay in the celebrity facet of the idea of that passion. Those who are passionate for him are very, very, very passionate for him.
Fair enough.
And Jeff Perlman and I had that discussion, and my editors probably don't want me writing that out loud, but boy, you could read that. You can see that's kind of the subtext of which I'm getting at. And I think he'd be very good at that game, because those parts of the job, he is excellent. Nobody stirs things up and gets a base ready to go and play to an audience. From day one, when they introduced him, it was Baptist revival mode, baby. Here we go. And you just had these, I've never seen that many stuffy Caucasians look at each other uncomfortably to be very PC and be like, I guess we're in church now. I guess here we go. And there's sort of this Blues Brothers hallelujah from the back of the room kind of rolls all the way. And that's what we found, which we could go down this rabbit hole too. So curious about his hire to begin with, that it probably wouldn't be crazy unlike him showing up in Fargo, for an example of just cultural, not same, but it's been healthy, and it's been a healthy cultural exchange. But for the purposes of the column in that day, everybody had been kind of yanked along, which is what he does. And to a degree, he's always done it. We're probably not that much different in age, much to our mutual chagrins. And I dated myself by making an NCC reference. Yes. But we grew up with this. This has been who he is, and we knew he would be a part of. Now, the postscript to that Wednesday was then he did hire a DC, and it did get leaked. And I think Ian Rappaport or somebody leaked it because it was someone with NFL ties, but it was not Bill Belichick. It was the Bengals safety coach. Yeah. If you could name him without looking it up.
I cannot, by the way, name him.
That's right, because you can't. Right. You will have to look it up.
And nobody can.
Right.
But there's a million different tentacles here. We could with your words there in your monologue there's 1,000 different ways we could go on this. But let me. You brought it up, so I wasn't going to ask you because it really isn't central to what the game in August. But I will ask you, what was the pushback? You mentioned, I mean, you're taking on a god, if you will, in the college football world, and certainly locally in Denver and Boulder. And I can watch on television in Moorhead, Minnesota, where I live, and go, wow, this is not a college football game when there's The Rock and Lil Wayne and all of these celebrities in the sidelines credentialed for the game. This is a whole different deal that's totally enveloped the state of Colorado. When you write what you wrote, and I've been known to write some things that get people stirred up locally here as well. What was the reaction? What was the pushback?
The things that hurt, because I don't know if they hurt, actually, because what hurts has a grain of truth. Whether you're dishing it out or whether you're taking it, that's what hurts. I think what sort of, again, speaks to the fervor and passion is generally social media comes out and you get pockets that accuse you of racism, that your agenda is right there. And that's new for me here. I should say that isn't necessarily, I mean, it's untrue and it's hurtful on a lot of levels fundamentally, but it's new. It's unique to this. Like, I've said the same kind of stuff about Carl Durrell, a coach who happens to be, let's put it this way. There's been coaches even in this job who happen to be black. Mel Tucker.
Yes.
Happened to, but they, in a way, how I describe where it's different with Deion, they happen to be black. And I make sure that I talk about this with friends who are diverse, who are from different backgrounds, who can sort of enlighten me on this. But Deion is a whole nother level, where back to the Colts thing, where that is someone intrinsic and beloved to segments of the population that feel personally taken aback, that presume you have that agenda because of their race or creed.
Okay.
That's new. That's weird to me because I'm an equal opportunity butthole. I don't see race. I see a coach, and I see their words, their deeds, and their action, and not who they are fundamentally genetically. That isn't where that registers. And I think actually Deion's kind of that way to a point. And yet we also have to be real to the point I made a minute ago, and that this was always going to be, and it still kind of is, a fish out of water story, because and it also is a part of the sensitivity here, which goes to another tentacle, and that is Boulder is among the whitest cities in America. You've probably been, or you know people here. It just is. And that's the thing that sort of struck us as a fascinating, it's kind of not it's a reality show now. It's not a sitcom, but you'd almost write a sitcom plot out of this. It's sort of one of those, what happens when a coach who's from the deep South, who is very culturally embedded and is a hero of his people for a generation, and of all people to a generation, comes to the whitest towns in America, who's never been in the snow, comes to the ski capital of America. Yeah. We laugh about it because it does feel like kind of a bosom buddies sitcom script in some degree, and that cross-pollination of cultures has been really interesting. And it's been really progressive in a lot of good ways. I've written about that too, that African Americans in Boulder and in Colorado feel empowered and feel a great connection for this, and in a way that and yet I have to kind of go, but you didn't with Mel Tucker and Carl Durrell? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but again, Deion is at a different.
Deion is a
completely different level. I mean, Mel Tucker could walk down. Mel Tucker could walk down Broadway in downtown Fargo, and nobody, including myself, would know who Mel Tucker is. Deion could walk down Broadway, and there'd be 200 people around him because he's Deion Sanders. He's primetime. Right.
And that, although that doesn't have to do with race.
No. Right. It has to do with celebrity.
The fact that this is one of the best three cornerbacks ever played.
Baseball player, television star.
Right. This is about celebrity, which is my point about the Colt. It's not really about, to me, and my irritation with things is not about race.
No.
Again, from history, and we couldn't be in this job. You couldn't be in this job if you were fundamentally racist. No. You're going to have a hard time dealing with the exchanges there. I think it's the celebrity and the insulation of the celebrity that make it challenging. I mean, that's a whole nother tentacle, because covering this, to be really shorthand about it, man, it's like a Kardashian parachuting in to coach your football team. It really is all of that. We are kind of cut out of this inner circle that's kind of come in and redefine this football program and become the front porch. And I mean, full disclosure, it is frustrating at times from an access perspective that maybe also tempers some of our I was not alone in speaking that and writing that, I think,
Right.
for a lot of the local press corps, because we are a bit boxed out at times for the access that we're used to, the relationships that we're used to, because in simplest terms, the Buffs went from not just one of the worst programs in Power Five success from a success standpoint, they were one of the least covered.
Yes.
Programs from
nobody cared about Colorado football.
Right, nobody cared. And literally here locally, as you
Right.
imagine, that had fallen off quite a bit. So now I wrote this too. Nobody's going to go Google this, but please, if you do get a subscription and Google me and Deion, I wrote last November for all of the football issues this program still has. It's better. 1-11 to 4-8 is better. They could not have asked for a bigger PR home run than what they got. They got the right guy for what they wanted, if what they wanted was for you. And that's me speaking, pointing a finger back to you, Mike, to care,
Yes.
to pay attention. They got that in bunches. That was the big win out of anything besides kicking Nebraska's tail.
But okay, but when and all of that is true, right? I mean, again, I'm a guy sitting in the middle of America that, prior to Deion Sanders being hired, was looking at the Colorado game in the future on the future schedule for North Dakota State and going, well, boy, this is a game that, it's going to be interesting, and there's going to be plenty of seats available for Bison fans to buy up. Right. And there's a really good chance they're going to win the game. It's Colorado, blah, blah, blah. When they hired Deion, it was like, oh my God, this is a whole different level of insanity. Yeah. And it's not Alabama, it's not USC, it's not Penn State, it's not Ohio State, it's not Michigan, it's freaking Colorado, which, that's a whole different tentacle. But it makes everybody sit up and pay attention. I watched more Colorado football last fall by far than I'd ever watched before in my life. And there was one reason why I did that. And it wasn't because I wanted to watch the left tackle or the quarterback, frankly. It was because I wanted to see, because it was Deion Sanders was coaching them. And everybody was talking about it. And everybody was covering it. And even with my frustration of national media, i.e. ESPN, Fox, just completely filleting Deion Sanders and filleting Colorado football nonstop and making them into a national contender, when anybody who actually watched the games said they're not a national contender. I'm not a coach. I know very little, relatively speaking, but I could watch the games and go, oh no, they're going to run some problems down the road here.
They don't play defense.
They can't block.
Come back to
just basic, simple stuff.
Yeah,
but I watched the games, okay? And so I went, this is interesting. Then when you fold in from our perspective in Fargo, God, the local FCS team is going to play these guys next August. Then the interest really ramps up and you start to look at it. Now, when I read your piece as a columnist, I cheered because of the fantastic writing, but also because I said, thank you, because somebody's pointing out to me the obvious as an outsider 1,500 miles away, that they're not that good. They weren't that good last fall. They weren't that good last fall, despite all of the adulation from
the SI cover.
Right. My God, the Sportsman of the Year, for God's sakes. But all of that aside, they're not that good, and at some point he has to deliver. I think maybe the Colorado administration doesn't believe that. Maybe the true believers don't believe that. But I believe that if you're gonna hype all of this, and good for Deion for doing that. I have no problem with him coaching. I have no problem with the hype. I don't have to cover him on a regular basis, so I don't care what he does. But at some point, you have to win some football games. And if you're going to go on national TV, even though it's a tiny audience with Skip Bayless because nobody watches the show, and say, we're going to be in the college football playoffs, even if it's an expanded 12-team playoff, those are big words because they weren't very good last year. And so at some point, you have to deliver. I thought your column at the very least just said, hey, whoa, wait a second here. At some point, we have to put a little check on Deion here, and he can't say whatever he wants and get away with it because he's going to have to deliver at some point.
Right. That was the point. It's the on-the-field product. It went south, and their coordinator hires have not been great. And this is just football stuff.
Yes.
This isn't race.
It's not personal. It's not race. It's not.
This is just football stuff. Where I began to slip and start to wonder, and we haven't gotten into the NCAA stuff. We haven't gotten into I mean, there are sketchy things here. Now, just my concern, strictly as a observer and critiquer of football, as you are as a columnist and someone who has been around since scoring NCC games back in 1985 as a fresh-faced sixth grader, whatever I was, and much skinnier with hair. The thing that began to show the cracks for me was when they demoted Sean Lewis as offensive coordinator last year. And there is more to that story than has gotten out that for legal and ethical reasons have not been said. But let's just say the unsaid, that they had a very good assistant coach and they blew it. And they replaced him with an inferior assistant coach.
Yes.
And the results, even from afar, you saw that. Now, let's put it this way. And I had some experience with Pat Shurmur when he was with the Broncos. I was the one who asked him the infamous pencil question from which the pencil Pat came out of. I did not know at the time he was going to pull up. I had just asked, what does social media think of you, or words to that effect? Do you ever get a chance because you're so busy? You know, the NFL life is, they sleep on cots in the room. It's all consuming. Do you ever get a chance to see or get family members tell you, was my question to Pat Shurmur, then the Broncos offensive coordinator, what people say about you? Do you ever Google yourself? Might have been up there. And he gave me this great look. Yeah, Google. And he pulls out this pencil and goes, I got this pencil here. When you got a guy bringing out props, Carl Weathers, you got a stew going, baby. You're going
and Arrested Development.
Right. And all the Broncos media, and you got some Broncos media corps, you got some hard, gristled dudes there. They all got. I love watching the eyes and the thumbs of the beat guys when you ask questions. That everyone just went like this really quickly to get the social out of the struggling offensive coordinator waving his magic pencil. So Pat Shurmur returned to the wrong market to try to redeem himself, but that was Prime's fallback plan. The reason why that happened may come out sometime, maybe not soon, but they're complicated. The stories are a little weirder than the truth.
Oh, okay.
But someday I would say that I'd like to say I have the Deion book all lined up. I don't, but things like that, where the stuff even beneath what's been out there is a little weirder. They give you pause. And the football side of what CU football is, with just the football, with Deion, gives me pause and some concern. Now, if we want to steer this back to the game and what's coming and scouting the Buffs a little bit on the field, to a point, that said, and all those critiques being said, and the coordinators being underwhelming, and a first-time O-line coach and a first-time DC, and all these red flags that to you and I would be red flags anywhere, not just here.
Yep.
That said, they're going to be better.
Okay.
And in fact, the fact that I wrote and did what I did, because you could Google me and the Chiefs right now, and I'm eating my Twitter feed is a radioactive, toxic mess. If you're feeling bad about your life, enter my name into X, and you will feel so much better about yourself right now. If you need to pick me up, just be so glad that you are not me, whoever you are. Bless you. If I could save one life from this podcast, that would be the one goal for the suffering I felt. Now, full disclosure, I married into a Chiefs family. My wife is a Chiefs fan. She's lovely. I married up. She looks like Lois Griffin. I look like Peter. I love her, and likewise she puts up with a lot. A little bit. I don't drink beer straight from the spigot, but we don't get far off that. But I had made fun of the Chiefs mid-season slump. Let's put it that way. And when the Broncos finally beat them, as you know, finally had been 20 meetings, 18 meetings, whatever it was. I like, and when the Broncos defense had turned around, I went, this is the key. They figured it out. They got to a game back of the Chiefs. Here's a technical tangent. I'm sorry. Here's what's frustrating if you're a Broncos fan, as you'd imagine, here in this market. It's like the Chiefs didn't care this year until they had to. And then suddenly, like this switch flipped. That's really not good if you're in the AFC West. Just as an aside.
Andy Reid just changed the offense. He changed the he just kind of he had like a regular season team and a playoff team, and like they went on to win the Super Bowl. It's like,
right. They did one where they went, what do we got to do? We got 10-7, get to 11. Okay. We got to do this. They're like, look at what we're going to do this now. Okay, because I believe they were 8-6, and the Broncos were 8-5, and the Broncos were 7-6. That sounds right. And then it just went like then ships in the night, and away it went. So I'm getting a lot of grief there, but with Prime, I think they are. I think with CU, their whole strategy is, and here's the good and the bad of this from the Deion, the Jackson State experience. It's relatively unchanged. Like the playbook's there. If you watch the TV show, it's the people who put together are great at what they do. They're better at what they do than say Prime is coaching. The people who do the show.
Right.
Compliment to them. Compliment to everybody. But also because basically CU is just going to try to out-talent you. Like that's it. Yes. That's the plan.
Right.
We did this in August. I'd tell you the same thing. Strategy. We don't even know what this. Here's the good news. I guess if you're a Buffs fan, it may be less good. If you're a Bison fan, obviously, is not only are you going to get pretty good speed, you're going to get NFL players here now. And then to Prime's credit, that is better. That is the talent has gone leaps and bounds. Again, we all were watching that TCU game going, tabula rasa. This is going to be blank slate. We don't know what this is going to look like. And you get one look at Shedeur at full speed and Dylan Edwards at full speed and Travis Hunter, who's a generational, insane talent at full speed. You just kind of go, okay.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's, from a North Dakota State perspective, that's the issue. A couple different things. And I've had these discussions locally with some people as well. But, number one, NDSU also has a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, a number of new assistant coaches because the previous head coach went on to become an assistant at USC. So NDSU has that going on. They have a bunch of players returning, including both their quarterbacks who play different roles. They have their two best offensive linemen returning. They did lose some there. They have all their key defenders returning. All of that is good. The issue for me, and I think for any Bison fans who saw the games the last couple of years, is I just don't think the talent, for various reasons, is at the level it was when NDSU beat Kansas State, when NDSU beat Iowa. NDSU is still really good in FCS. They are in a down year last year. I'm doing air quotes on a podcast. In a down year, they got to the semifinals. And I still think we're the second best team in the country behind South Dakota State in FCS, but they were a million miles behind where South Dakota State was this last year. South Dakota State last year was the old Bison. NDSU just isn't at that level, in my opinion. They're still very good at their level, in my opinion. The flip side of that is, Sean, is what you just got to, which is you can talk about, Colorado's probably not going to be too well meshed up front because they're going to have 5 new offensive linemen. Yeah. They have a bunch of new defensive linemen. They have 24 transfers. And
there'll be more.
Right. ABC. You can come up with all these reasons why this should be a good matchup. But the bottom line is what you exactly said, is at some point the talent is going to win out, right? Maybe Deion Sanders, and I don't even know this, and I think it's insulting, by the way, for people to say, well, I don't think he's a great head coach. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't know. I'm not going to say that because I just don't follow it closely enough. But at some point, it ain't going to matter because
Yeah.
because Shedeur Sanders is going to be way faster than Sam Young, NDSU safety, and Travis Hunter is going to be way more talented than Jaquise Alexander, North Dakota State starting. So NDSU is going to be a really good FCS team. They might win a national championship again this year in FCS, but at some point, the talent level is just going to win out, and the coaching's not going to matter. The discipline's not going to matter. The fundamentals aren't going to matter. I can have the greatest fundamentals in the world. I'm not going to be able to match up against Jason Tatum on the basketball. It's just not going to matter because it's just not that. And so I think that's, in my opinion, on February 13th, that's where we're at. If that changes, maybe it changes. But at this point, Shedeur and Travis and the kids he's bringing in are just going to be better athletes, and there's going to be way too many of them, I think, at some point for NDSU to handle.
Yeah, that's a great point. As we get to the game, as we kind of break that down, that's really the bottom line of this. And I don't see that changing 6 months from now. Like, I think that's going to be the scouting report of whatever the individual matchups are. The problem is the individual matchups. Yeah. And that's no disrespect to, again, an elite FCS program. I think the Buffs are going to have top 20 kind of talent, that kind of thing, where that is the approach. That is, if we Jimmy and Joe everybody to death, a lot of Jimmys and Joes, X's and O's don't matter. Right. They don't. Yep. But they will for the Buffs, which is but to them, that's what they ran into in the Pac-12, which also, in their defense, was an excellent league last year. That wasn't they went out with a bang. They're breaking up the band, but that was a fabulous farewell tour for a league that hasn't now in men's hoops isn't having it. But for football, it was one of the better Pac-12s they'd had. The quarterbacks breaking on down the line. Arizona might have been the fifth best team, and that was a pretty good crew at the end with what they built. So. And now Chip Kelly flees the league entirely. That's a whole, as he goes to the Big Ten, that's a whole nother tentacles. But yeah, so in the Buffs' defense, they also ran into the meat of their schedule after making that OC switch. And again, it did not help them, but it was the same idea. Again, the good and the bad from this with what Deion Sanders gives you is he's very public about what he wants to do. He's very genuine about what he wants to do. And what he says he thinks he can do, and what he thinks his kids can do. I also covered Pete Rose in Cincinnati, showing my age. So I'm always wary of, and that's not a great example, but I'm always wary of superstars who say, do what I do, but can't teach it to some degree. Although the counter to the Deion can't teach, two of his best four players are his kids. And who taught them? And that's been said to me, and that's been inferred to me, and I think that is a fair point from just a teaching standpoint. Although then I would contend, who's their dad?
There's always that comeback. Yes,
it's nature nurture. The nature is very, very good all the way around. Then also you have a good nurturer who can make this happen too, from a teaching standpoint, because. Back to the talent thing. Shedeur Sanders is an NFL quarterback. I mean, is he a top 10 pick in 25? I don't know. Health, I think, is going to determine that because he got his brains kicked in eventually. And then also what you saw with the diminishing returns of a 3-0 team that finishes 4-8 is you had a guy with a broken back trying to throw it and just could not. The zip on the throws was obvious from, say, week 3 to week 10. It was clear something was wrong. We just didn't know to what degree, because that stuff gets pay. Well, here it gets paywalled because there's also a bit of a pay-to-play access with Coach Prime access, which is another concern and a whole nother tentacle. But the talent is different. And that's not a knock on the Bison at all. They're going to try to out-talent everybody because that's all they know. Like that, the modus operandi is, look, if we get the best travel team you've ever seen and we line it up, we'll fake. I don't care because you saw this happen from afar. I literally saw, especially early on, the whole third down, just throw it to Travis. I mean, this was, this was the Bengals with Jarvis kind of stuff. You know, this was throw it to X, Y, or Z. They'll just make a play. That literally was happening.
Yes.
So you have to.
Yes.
I almost felt bad for some of the D coordinators there, where it's like you had again, unless you're top 10 talent wise, you have an NFL corner of your own. You cannot counter this. This is just going to happen. I like your Jason Tatum parallel. This is just going to happen.
Yes.
You can either get mad about it or you run it through. But the funny thing was it stopped, which I'm trying to determine still in my head how much of that was the change in OC and scheme and how much of that was a quarterback playing with a broken back. And that's the thing here we're trying to figure out too.
And from a Bison perspective, and I've covered this team since the Morningside days back in 1997. I think it was my first year covering North Dakota State football. And the NDSU team of 2019, 2021. I mean, the 2019 Bison team had, I think it ended up having 12 or 13 kids that at least got a chance with NFL teams. I think it had 4 offensive linemen that ended up playing in the NFL. And so that was a team where you look at and go, ain't nobody beating them in FCS. And if they get a chance against an FBS team, we're going to have a pretty good chance to win that game, unless it was Alabama or something.
Right.
You line up that team against this Colorado team, even with all the talent that it has, then you go, okay, NDSU's going to be able to do some things because they're going to be able to maul them up front. They might break their spirit. I mean, we'll see how a Colorado team responds when it's getting its ass kicked up front. When they expect to roll, I mean, then we'll see. I don't know if this Bison team is going to be able to do that, where it's, the NDSU teams of the past, the great ones, they just broke the spirit of some of these teams. Where a Kansas State and an Iowa are going, what the hell's going on here? We're getting the crap kicked out of us physically against a team that we're supposed to beat by 4 touchdowns.
And 2 places, speaking to both intimately, where that is their DNA.
Yes.
We're just going to run you over. The theoretical, the buy games, which those are, the buy with air quotes again on a podcast. We're just gonna run the ball for they bring NDSU in or whomever from the FCS because they want to hand it off 65 times.
Correct.
Like that's the point of that game, is to get work for everybody else, and then that doesn't happen.
And for Colorado, NDSU is going to play the game. I mean, NDSU is not going to just come in and say, give us our whatever it is, $650,000, and we'll be happy to. And NDSU.
Can we get a picture when we take the check? Can Prime hand us the check?
Right. It is not going to be that. It is going to be, to quote Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. And NDSU will be playing to win the game, because to win that game for North Dakota State would be a Super Bowl victory for them, right? I mean, it would be bigger than all their other FBS victories, just because it's Deion Sanders, just because it'll be the lead story on ESPN for 2 days, all of those reasons. The NFL will not have started yet at that point. It would be a massive victory for North Dakota State. They have a veteran team. They want to win the game. They're going to physically play the game. I just don't know if they're going to have the talent and the speed to be able to match up with Colorado, no matter how raw Colorado is with its assistants and its transfers and all of those things. At some point, the talent is just going to overcome everything else, in my opinion.
Very simply, CU wants to turn every game into a track meet, which is what, again, you saw the TCU game there. Yep. I think that's the design. That is, they started with apex buffs. This is what we want this to look like. We're going to be faster Texas Tech. Cool, here we go. And again, but that changed when they lost Lewis. So I think that's still the core principle, because they know they're not dumb. I don't know that they're brilliant, but they're not dumb. They know we're going to outrun people, and this is until we can't, and then we've got to come up with something. But in the case of that matchup, it's that simple. I don't think it's any deeper than that into the points we've already made. That unfortunately, one team's going to try to make this about the speed and the skill, and the other one has to make it about the fundamentals.
Right.
and their execution. And
that's where I go back to if it was a different Bison team, which it's not.
Well, and they've had talent,
right? I mean, but if it was a different team that could control the ball and keep Colorado's offense off the field, and then hope that you get a turnover, hope you catch a break, hope you make one stop or two stops, then you go, okay, can it be a one-score game in the fourth quarter? I think it's just going to be difficult for the Bison to do that, but we'll see. I mean, they surprised me before.
And the CU at the end of last year, you could conceivably see the
Buffs team I saw at the end of last year. Again, it's like, wow. I mean, could they play the game right now from a North Dakota State perspective? Because North Dakota State might have won the game, but after offseason,
November
of reloading and bringing in transfers and getting healthy and all those different things. But as you wrote, I mean, Colorado's Colorado, and they ain't going to care that it's North Dakota State. I don't mean to disrespect anybody with Colorado, but they don't know who the hell North Dakota State is.
Well, they do for the wins you mentioned, and I think that those who are there are football smart. Boulder is football smarter than I gave it credit for from a distance, having been a child of the Big 8 and the Big 12 and the Big 10 a little bit. In fact, I always used to joke, and again, we're going back to generations ourselves of the 90s Buffs. I always kind of look as that became a thing, and Bill McCartney made that a thing with Nebraska, back to the Huskers again, that I always kind of looked at CU as Nebraska light. And they took that as a compliment, and including some of the disciplinary issues they had famously in the 80s and 90s as they were building that thing. It was kind of roguish. It kind of came up that way, but they had kind of a Raiders vibe, like, that's we're going to have to outdo that. Let's go outdo that. And they did for a time, and they made it something different. And now chasing Nebraska is something you laugh at. It's a different deal now. The context has completely changed. But that was the goal at the time in the red letter game on every front. So they're not going to be looking. Let's put it this way: the Colorado fans are going to be slightly afraid of North Dakota State. Deion fans are not. And those are back to our original tenet with this. Those are two different things. Okay. And that has been fascinating to watch.
Yep.
Because though Deion fans have attacked Buff-friendly media for even raising the minimum of things or pointing out the obvious, some beat writers here in the market have been savaged on social media and they are beloved by Buffs media. And about last September, one of the more fun things for me, just in a very cynical way, leading up to week one, was watching Deion fans attack CU fans defending a beat writer on something because they're like, no, he's one of us, which is a dubious title anyway, although
that goes back, not to make it political again, but that it goes back to what you said early, which is they're almost Trump-like in their devotion.
Yeah, which is back to that.
In today's political world, you have that in the Republican Party, which is you have the Trump backers, which are growing, by the way, but that's
right. But just statistically, it's not political.
They're attacking other Republicans because they're not devoted enough to the leader.
And that's very much that. Again, where I bring that analogy, it's very much just not politically, statistically and intrinsically. That was fascinating to watch because it wasn't on me. It was on people who are considered, on the team and friendly to it. You just go, wow, this is really a thing. So Deion fans and CU fans are different things. And they're in the same tent. It's become a bigger tent.
Yes.
Back to because of that, but there is also a resounding fear at some point long term, and we're going to come up on an hour here, and we could do a whole other hour.
We have a long summer ahead of us. We have a long summer.
We do. We'll come back and do this because I did a whole series on this where it became it became 3 2,000-word essays about all these elements that he touches on, but. The long-term future, I don't know to you from a distance, it certainly isn't built that way It feels when you know, and this doesn't concern your audience, but it really will concern the people that if you come up to Boulder, this will concern them because, and unfortunately, back to the Trump comparison, what does this look like if we don't have this figure?
Yes.
What do we have? Yes. Because Shiloh Sanders' eligibility is done after this year. Travis Hunter will be eligible for the NFL draft. Jador Sanders will be eligible for the NFL draft. And you don't have to do the math on that one. When a guy is coached as a father, his kids, almost their entire junior high to now adult lives, and that clock runs out at this level, there's a little bit of all of us going, how long have we really got with this? Is this a 2-year deal? Is it really what this is?
And I can spin this back locally because there was a coaching change recently at North Dakota State. And, one of the tenets of hiring the next guy always at North Dakota State is that they have to understand what North Dakota State is, right? They have to understand the foundation. They have to understand the history. They have to understand what all of that means to the current program and then to the next coach moving forward. And so there's an underpinning there that no matter who the head coach is, the goal is that they may not win a championship every year, but they ain't ever going to go 2-9, and they're not going to get away from who they are, which is we're going to run the football. We're going to be physical. We're going to play defense, and we're not going to burn the town down with the players that we have. This is who we are. This is what we do. And so no matter who comes in, no matter who moves on to a bigger job, the next guy has a foundation. And it was very important for the previous coach, Matt Entz, when I talked to him after he had gone to USC. This was a tough year for Matt Entz because they lost to their arch rival badly. They lost to UND badly. They just weren't what they had been in the past in several ways. But by the end of the year, again, they were pretty damn good. And what Matt Entz told me was the foundation is there. I left the program in a spot where the next coach can win more championships because the foundation is there. Is there a foundation in Boulder? That's the question. Is whenever Deion leaves, is there a foundation for the next guy to come in and continue whatever he's got going? Or is it just a circus that came to town for 2 or 3 years and they brought in a bunch of talented guys and they're just going to out-talent you? But when the next guy comes in, he comes in and says, well, what the hell? There's nothing here. There's no program here. It was just a bunch of players. It wasn't a program. There's nothing here. And so I think from here, when I look to Boulder, that's the question I have is once Deion leaves, and God bless him for doing what he's doing there now, when he leaves, then what's left in his wake?
Those are excellent questions. And I think privately they're being whispered about in very uncomfortable tones here.
But do they care? And the bigger question is, does the athletic director or the president care because they got 2 or 3 years of this out of this, and that's more than they would have gotten anyway?
Let's put it this way, and this is extremely shorthand. The chancellor is retiring later this year. The athletic director has said he probably will retire in 2 and has said, so you're answering your own question, and has said on the record when Deion was hired December of 2022, this is the last football coach I will ever hire. And I wrote that at the time too. Again, denverpost.com, please like and subscribe and do with Mike's as well. That this is middle-aged men buying the sports, going on a fling, buying the sports car. There was probably a more PC parallel. Yes. You see where I'm going for, where that was a expletive it hire, where they just went, you know what, expletive it. Yep. What have we got to lose?
Yep.
And other Buffs alums have said to me that literally it was the F word it hire. They just went, we have nothing. We have, and let's just take the circus, and the leaders that are doing this are going to be out of this picture anyway. And let's have a great 3 years. Let's just have fun and do where it goes. And unfortunately, those long-term questions are there, and someone is going to have to pay, do the cleanup on the Mardi Gras here. Yeah. And I don't think it'll be anyone who's in this current administration, with the exception of the president. There's a chancellor, there's a president, there's an AD. The chancellor and AD won't be a part of that. And they don't care. Okay. They care because this is what they're going to leave. And there are so many chips as we come on the hour mark here, and I'll start wrapping this up, that have been pushed into this year. All the chips have been kind of pushed for this. So back to my Twitter feed and ripping the Chiefs. They'll be 7-0. They'll be 8-0. They're gonna be in. Just now, I looked at Halloween and their schedule. I thought, oh God, they're gonna be a playoff team now. They're gonna be in contention. I don't think they absolutely get there, because I want to get your opinion on these road games as we get to the end of their slate, because you won't care. You're out of that. At Arizona, at Texas Tech, at KU, at Arrowhead, Utah at home, Oklahoma State at home. That's how they end up. Yeah. There's at least something that won't land. But if it doesn't, I guarantee you the playoff won't hesitate to. There were bowl games looking for loopholes to get a 5 and 7.
That's good business. I would have.
For academic.
The team down the road from here, the Minnesota Gophers, were what? Five and 7. And they got a bowl bid because of their APR, which is good for them. But you think any bowl in the world wouldn't have wanted Colorado above Minnesota?
They were trying to invent rules to get a 4-8 team in. They were talking behind the scenes of, is there anyone who can do this? And then Prime's going, on Prime, I play in something every year. And they're like, that's not how this works exactly here. So it gets to be a little absurd, but it's never boring, and we knew it wouldn't be. To wrap up, I found the North Dakota State Morningside game in question, although there were two.
Oh my God.
And there's so many that are butt kickings of that era, but I'm going to lean on the one I'm thinking of because it's later in the calendar year, was in fact October 25th, 1986 at Roberts Stadium in Sioux City, Iowa. And it's Bison 63, Maroon Chiefs nothing. It probably is that one. Although there was a 62-7 game 2 years later. I think it's the 63-0.
No, we have to wrap because I got to be done here. But if memory serves me correctly, and I might be completely wrong, I thought Morningside actually upset NDSU one year in football, like one strangely odd, out of this world game, because Morningside had some coach that came in and kind of was a little fast and loose with the way things were supposed to be, and may have paid a price later on with NCAA penalties. But I thought that he had a team for a couple of years that was at least competitive and might have beat NDSU. I could be totally wrong, but I'll look that up after we.
I'm on the site, and I can tell you there is a tie from out of nowhere, and that's
okay. All right, so maybe that's what I was thinking of then.
Maybe there's an 18-18. In fact, there's an 18-18 in Fargo in 1985, which would then probably rationalize the 63-0 on which we refer. So that's and the Morningside went off a cliff pretty hard after the 80s, and obviously kind of gave up that level altogether. Yeah. So it might be that one. It might be that tie. The tie. That words to blood feud.
Wow. God.
Sometime we'll do this again before the fall. We'll have to look up the 18-18 game and what happened.
I will do that. Sean, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. That's just great stuff, and I hope we can do another one or two of these before the Bison invade Boulder on August 31st of this fall. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope NDSU fans appreciate what a big deal this is going to be, and I think they will, because it's Deion Sanders and it's prime time and it's going to be national TV. It's going to be all those things, and I hope they can certainly appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Bison on Bison crime. I can't wait. Take care. Thanks, Mike.
Sean Keeler, columnist for the Denver Post on the McFeely Mess podcast at inforum.com. That was great stuff. We'll try to get Sean back again sometime later this summer. Thanks for listening, y'all, and we'll be back again soon enough.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess podcast at inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to inforum.com and search Mike McFeely.